My sister secretly scheduled a lavish anniversary celebration for me and my husband-to-be on the very same day as our wedding, complete with a rented hall, decorations, cake, DJs, mailed invites, and even a hired photographer. So my parents RSVP'd to that sham event instead of walking me down the aisle, until my grandfather threatened to disinherit them and expose their betrayal to the entire family. My sister, 28F, and I, 26F, have always had a tense relationship. Our parents have consistently favored her ever since we were kids. She got the bigger bedroom, the newer clothes, and more attention during every milestone. I eventually learned to live with it and focused on building my own life instead of trying to win their approval. My fiancé proposed last January, and we set our wedding date for June 15th of this year. We sent out save the dates in August and formal invitations in February. Everyone in the family RSVP'd, including my parents and sister. We put down non-refundable deposits for the venue, catering, photographer, DJ, and flowers. Everything was locked in. Then, out of nowhere last month, my sister announced she was throwing a second anniversary party on June 15th. I was confused, since her actual wedding anniversary is in August. I called her to ask about the conflict, expecting she'd say it was just a scheduling mistake. Instead, she snapped, "It's not a big deal. You can just move your date." I was stunned. I calmly explained that we'd already paid thousands in deposits, sent invitations months ago, and all of our vendors were booked. Changing the date now would mean losing money and creating chaos just weeks before the wedding. She didn't care. She just hung up on me. I thought my parents would see how unreasonable she was being, so I called them expecting support. Instead, my mom immediately took her side, saying, "It's just one day for you, but this is an important milestone for Olivia." I pointed out it wasn't even her real anniversary date. My dad jumped in and said, "Your sister's celebrations matter more because she puts in effort to maintain relationships," basically implying that I don't. The conversation got worse from there. They confirmed they'd be attending her fake anniversary party instead of my wedding. My dad said he'd already told Olivia they'd be there and didn't want to go back on their word, completely ignoring the fact that they had RSVP'd to my wedding months ago. I hung up the phone in tears. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking, my parents were skipping my wedding for a party that didn't even have to happen that day. The next morning, my fiancé suggested I talk to someone else in the family who might be able to talk sense into them. So I called my grandpa Earl, 75M. He's always been supportive of me. Even while dealing with health problems, he had a heart attack last year and has to be careful about travel. Despite that, he had already confirmed he'd attend our wedding, even though it's a 3-hour drive from his home. When I told Grandpa Earl what happened, he was furious. He couldn't believe my sister had planned her party for the same day, or that my parents would skip my wedding for it. He promised he'd be there no matter what, and said he'd speak to my parents. During our conversation, he brought up something I didn't know. Over the years, he'd built up a significant amount of wealth through smart investments and real estate. He said he was planning to leave a large inheritance to my parents, my sister, and me. But after hearing how they were treating me, he said he might reconsider his will. I told him that wasn't necessary. I was just grateful to have his support. 4 days later, I got a call from my mom. Her tone was completely different. She said they had reconsidered and would be coming to my wedding after all. She made it sound like they were doing me some kind of favor, saying, "Families should stick together for important events." But there was no apology, no acknowledgement of how hurtful their earlier decision had been. Later that same day, my sister called to say she was postponing her anniversary party. She claimed it was because some of her friends couldn't make it, not because it conflicted with my wedding. Again, no apology. No admission that scheduling a fake anniversary party on my wedding day was wrong. And neither of them mentioned Grandpa Earl or anything about the inheritance. Something felt off about their sudden change of heart. The next time I spoke with Grandpa Earl, I asked if he had said anything to them. He admitted he had called my father and told him he was reconsidering the will after hearing how they treated me. That's when it all clicked. They didn't change their minds because they cared about me or realized they were wrong. They did it because they were scared of losing money. I was heartbroken. I spent that night talking it over with my fiancé, who was just as disgusted as I was. The next morning, I called my parents and told them not to bother coming to the wedding. I knew they were only coming for the inheritance, not because they actually wanted to support me on one of the most important days of my life. My dad immediately said I was being dramatic. My mom started crying and said I was misinterpreting their intentions, that they'd always planned to come, which was just a flat-out lie. They'd clearly told me days earlier that they were skipping it. Then I got a text from my sister. It said, "You've always been jealous of me. Stop being such a worthless burden to everyone who has to deal with your pathetic insecurities." That was the final straw. I blocked her number immediately. Within hours, extended family members started messaging me. It became clear that my parents were telling everyone I banned them out of jealousy and spite, without mentioning anything about what really happened. My fiancé is standing by whatever decision I make, but with all this family pressure, I'm starting to doubt myself. Part of me wants to just let them come to avoid more drama. But the other part of me knows I'd just be letting them walk all over me, again. They've shown they don't care about being there for me. They only care about the money. Aita for refusing to let my family come to my wedding after learning the only reason they changed their minds was because of a possible inheritance? Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my original post, and I want to thank everyone who left comments and offered support. I also need to clear up a few misunderstandings I've seen. No, I don't want my grandfather's money. I never even knew he had any real savings until this whole situation blew up. I have a solid job, and my fiancé's job is even better. We're financially stable on our own. For anyone wondering why my sister would intentionally schedule her party on my wedding day, the truth is, this isn't the first time she's pulled something like this. She threw her college graduation party on my birthday, planned a family trip during my high school graduation week, and even announced her engagement at my engagement party. My parents always excused her behavior, saying she was just excited or didn't realize there was a conflict. But this wedding situation? It was the most obvious and deliberate one yet. After I shared my story here, things only got worse. My phone blew up with messages and calls from my family. My mom started calling daily, sometimes multiple times a day, crying each time. She'd begin like everything was fine, then burst into tears about how I was breaking her heart. These calls dragged on for hours unless I came up with a reason to end them. My sister started sending me nastier and nastier texts. I was stunned by how cruel she was being. I couldn't understand why she was so angry when she was the one who tried to ruin my wedding. Even my future mother-in-law, who had always stayed out of our family drama, got calls from my mom begging her to talk some sense into me. Thankfully, my fiancé's family was incredibly supportive. They never pressured me. Still, the stress was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate at work, and every time my phone rang, my chest would tighten. My boss noticed I wasn't performing well and called me into his office. I explained I was going through a tough time with family and the wedding. He was understanding, but reminded me that my responsibilities at work still mattered. One particularly awful night, I couldn't sleep at all. At 3 a.m., my fiancé found me crying in the bathroom. That's when he gently suggested that maybe, just maybe, letting my family attend the wedding would stop the constant harassment. He said we could just keep our distance from them during the event. As much as I hated the idea, I knew he was right. With the wedding less than a week away, I just couldn't take the stress anymore. So, even though it felt wrong, I called my parents the next day and told them they could come. I made it clear that this didn't mean I was okay with how they treated me. I just wanted the harassment to end and hoped we could be civil for one day. My mom immediately stopped crying and said, "Well, I'm glad you finally came to your senses." My dad just said, "Good. That's what families do." My sister didn't even respond to my text. It was like they believed they were entitled to be there all along, even though they had originally chosen to skip it. In the days leading up to the wedding, I tried to stay focused on final details and mentally prepare myself for seeing my family again. My bridesmaids were amazing. They promised to step in if anything got tense. My maid of honor even came up with a secret signal in case I needed help getting out of a conversation with my family. The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling a strange mix of joy and dread. I was marrying the love of my life, but also bracing for impact. My bridesmaids came early to help with hair and makeup. They brought champagne and breakfast and made sure I was laughing and distracted. Just as we were finishing up, my mom walked into the bridal suite. Right away, she started criticizing the hairstylist's work and said I should have gone with a different look. My maid of honor smoothly stepped in, saying the photographer needed to get some shots of just me and the bridesmaids, and quickly led my mom out. The ceremony itself was beautiful, despite the tension. I kept my eyes on my fiancé as I walked down the aisle, barely registering my father beside me. We decided to let him walk me down to avoid stirring up more drama, but we left out the traditional, "Who gives this woman?" part. My grandpa Earl sat proudly in the front row, despite his doctor warning him against travel due to his heart condition. Seeing him there, smiling so warmly, helped keep me grounded. At the reception, it was hard not to notice my parents and sister clinging to Grandpa Earl. They hovered around him, kept bringing him drinks, showed him photos, and acted overly attentive, while barely acknowledging me unless someone else was watching. Their behavior was so over the top that multiple guests later told me how obvious it was. My dad gave a short toast, but instead of celebrating our marriage, he talked about family unity and forgiveness. It felt more like a PR statement than something heartfelt. My sister looked bored the entire night, scrolling on her phone even during the speeches. I chose to spend my evening with my new husband, our friends, and especially Grandpa Earl. We sat together for a long time, and he shared stories from his youth and gave us heartfelt marriage advice that had us laughing and tearing up. Those were some of the best moments of the night. He stayed longer than anyone expected, despite his health, and told me he wouldn't have missed celebrating with his favorite granddaughter for anything. The next morning, we left for our honeymoon, a 2-week trip to Hawaii we'd been planning and saving for since our engagement. Being far away from all the family drama was exactly what we needed. About a week after we got back, my mom called to check in. After some small talk about the wedding and our trip, she got to the real reason for the call. She said, "Your grandfather seemed a bit cold toward us at the wedding. I was wondering if you could talk to him, maybe put in a good word." I didn't beat around the bush. I asked, "Are you asking me to convince Grandpa Earl not to cut you out of his will?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Well, we did come to your wedding like you wanted. I think you owe us that much." I reminded her that they only came because they were worried about their inheritance, not out of love or support, and told her I wasn't going to help them manipulate my grandfather. She hung up. Then my dad called. He was immediately hostile. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Turning your grandfather against us?" When I pointed out how they'd always favored my sister, he snapped and ended the call. My sister sent one final text, "You're selfish. If we lose our inheritance because of you, you'll regret it." I blocked all of their numbers after that. I had unblocked my sister before the wedding, thinking maybe things could get better, but clearly, they hadn't. My husband has been my rock through all of this. He keeps reminding me that I don't owe them anything after how they've treated me. We've decided to take some time to breathe and think before making any big decisions about how, or if, we'll deal with my family in the future. It's been a month since that last update. A lot of people asked why I didn't cut them off sooner. The truth is, I kept hoping things would get better, that they'd realize how they were treating me. It's harder than you'd think to cut off family, even when they keep hurting you. There were still some good memories mixed in with the bad, and that made it hard to fully walk away. But after I blocked their numbers, my family found other ways to get to me. My mom started emailing me every day, flipping back and forth between guilt trips and angry rants. My dad called my job 3 different times before my boss finally told the receptionist not to let his calls through. One night, while we were out, he even came by our apartment and left a note demanding I call him about some important family business. My sister took to social media, posting vague but very obvious jabs about me being ungrateful and manipulative. She even reached out to some mutual friends, telling them I was having mental health problems and needed an intervention. Thankfully, those friends knew me well enough to ask me directly instead of just believing her. When they couldn't get in touch with me, they started calling my husband. At first, he tried to be polite, saying I just needed space and would reach out when I was ready. But eventually, he had to block them too, after my dad called him at work and my sister sent him threatening texts. They even dug up old friends from college and high school, people I hadn't spoken to in years, and sent them messages. Those friends messaged me, confused and worried, asking what was going on. It was humiliating having to explain all this to people who were barely part of my life anymore. Then my parents actually showed up at our apartment on a Saturday morning. We were home, but we didn't answer the door. They knocked for almost 20 minutes before finally leaving. Later, our neighbors asked if everything was okay. They'd overheard my parents talking about my mental health and saying they might call the cops for a wellness check. It was wild. They suddenly seemed desperate to talk, which was ironic considering how little they cared about my wedding in the first place. Honestly, their behavior just confirmed that cutting contact was the right call. Not long after, Grandpa Earl called to check in. We had a long conversation, and I told him everything. That's when he told me something that helped explain a lot. Apparently, after the wedding, my parents and sister met with him. He thought they were going to apologize or try to make things right, but instead, they spent the whole hour asking about his will and his finances. He told me, "Your dad specifically asked about the inheritance split. Your sister wanted to know if I'd thought about setting up a trust fund for her future kids. And your mom brought up home renovations and hinted that an advance on her inheritance would be really helpful." Grandpa Earl was disgusted. He said he was so disappointed by how they acted that he changed his will, cutting them out entirely and giving their share to me. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that and that he shouldn't make such a big decision because of all this drama. But he insisted it was something he'd been considering for a while. "I've watched how they treat you for years," he said. "This wedding nonsense was just the last straw. You're the only one who visits me without wanting something in return. The rest only call when they need money or think I might be updating the will." I asked him not to tell them about the changes, hoping it might avoid more trouble. He agreed, but said he was moving forward with it anyway. 2 days later, my mom sent me an email with the subject line, "We know what you did." Inside, she accused me of manipulating Grandpa Earl and threatened legal action if I didn't fix things. Somehow, they'd found out about the will, even though Grandpa had promised to keep it quiet. When I called him to ask what happened, he explained that his lawyer's assistant had called my parents' house instead of his cell by mistake, just to confirm the appointment. Apparently, enough was said during that call for them to piece things together. After that, the harassment got worse. My mom kept emailing, accusing me of poisoning Grandpa Earl's mind. My sister started posting online, calling me a greedy, backstabbing snake who betrayed her own family for money. I called Grandpa Earl again to warn him, but he just laughed. "They can say whatever they want," he said. "I know the truth. And so do you. They're just showing their true colors." My husband and I started talking about moving since they knew where we lived. Our lease had another 6 months, but we began looking at places in different neighborhoods. A few friends even offered us a place to stay temporarily if things got worse or we felt unsafe. I also met with a lawyer about possibly getting a restraining order. She told me to document every single contact, calls, texts, emails, visits. She said we might be able to press harassment charges if it continued or escalated. So I started keeping a detailed log of everything. My husband was really worried about how much stress I was under. I wasn't sleeping well and had lost weight. He suggested we take a weekend away just to reset. So we booked a small cabin in the mountains, about 2 hours from the city. That short break, away from all the chaos, was exactly what we needed. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since that last update. A lot of you suggested installing security cameras, and we did. After my parents showed up unannounced a third time, we got a video doorbell and a small hallway camera outside our apartment. We explained everything to our landlord, and he approved the setup. And it didn't take long for the cameras to be useful. The day after we put them up, my mom came by again, ringing the doorbell over and over, and then yelling through the door when we didn't respond. All of it was caught on video, including her saying she'd call the police if I didn't grow up and talk to my family. Then, 2 days later, my sister came by with her husband, who clearly didn't want to be there. She knocked more calmly, but then started taking photos of our door and the hallway. A neighbor, who we'd filled in a bit, asked her what she was doing. She said she was worried about me and might hire a private investigator to check on me. That neighbor told her to leave, or he'd call building security. I got legal papers in the mail. My parents and sister are suing me. They're accusing me of manipulating Grandpa Earl into changing his will, claiming I used undue influence and made false statements. They're asking the court to cancel the changes and award them damages for emotional distress. I was stunned. I couldn't believe they would actually go this far. I called Grandpa Earl right away, worried about how this stress might affect his health. But to my surprise, he just started laughing. When I told him those delusional rats were trying to sue me for their own bad behavior, he said, "What a joke. I'm of sound mind, and no court can force me to leave my money to people I don't want to." He said he expected something like this might happen and had already taken steps to protect himself when he updated the will. He had his doctor run a full cognitive evaluation, which he passed easily. He also had the will signing witnessed by several people, including his lawyer and a notary. He even documented why he made the changes, pointing to specific things my parents and sister had done that really bothered him. Grandpa Earl insisted on covering my legal costs and had already contacted his attorney. When I met with my own lawyer that day, he reassured me that their case didn't stand a chance. Grandpa Earl had full mental capacity and had documented everything. Lawsuits like this almost never succeed unless there's solid proof of mental decline or actual fraud, the lawyer said. Your grandfather did everything right. I expect this to be dismissed, though the legal process can still take time. What hurt most were the things they accused me of in the lawsuit. They painted me as manipulative and greedy, even though I told Grandpa Earl multiple times not to change his will for me. They said I isolated him from the rest of the family, when in truth, they barely visited him before all this. They claimed I fed him lies about them, but all I did was tell him exactly what happened during the wedding planning mess. It was clearly projection, but it still stung seeing those lies in legal filings. As I read through the lawsuit, I could see how desperate they were. They just couldn't accept that Grandpa Earl made this decision on his own, based on their own behavior. My husband suggested we countersue for harassment, but I just wanted it all to be over. Grandpa Earl's attorney was confident the case would be dismissed quickly, so we focused on our defense instead of going on the attack. He advised us to keep documenting any contact and to avoid any interaction that could be misinterpreted. The day after I got the lawsuit, I received a text from an unknown number. It was my sister, using a friend's phone. She wrote, "You think you're so clever. Just wait until court. Everyone will see who you really are." I didn't reply, I just blocked the number. Right now, we're working with Grandpa Earl's attorney on our official response. He's confident we'll win, but warns it could still take a few months. In the meantime, we're trying to stick to our normal routine, though it's hard with this constant stress hanging over us. Final update. The lawsuit was dismissed 3 months ago, just as Grandpa Earl's lawyer predicted. The judge didn't even let it go to trial. She granted our motion for summary judgment after reviewing all the evidence. In her ruling, she said my parents and sister failed to provide any credible proof that Grandpa Earl was manipulated or mentally impaired. During the hearing, Grandpa Earl testified about their behavior and explained his reasons for changing the will. He was sharp, articulate, and totally in control. The judge was especially impressed with his detailed records and the medical proof of his cognitive health. My parents and sister spent a fortune chasing this baseless lawsuit. They hired a high-priced attorney who kept telling them they had a strong case, despite all the evidence saying otherwise. From what we heard through mutual contacts, they really believed they'd not only overturn the will, but also win damages from me. The case's dismissal hit them hard. Apparently, their attorney had just been stringing them along to rack up fees. They even filed a complaint against him with the state bar, but it was thrown out after review. 2 weeks after losing the case, my mom emailed me. She said their lawyer scammed them with promises of a guaranteed win, and now they were broke after spending all their savings. She asked if I could be generous and help out, since I'd be inheriting Grandpa Earl's money eventually. I didn't respond. A few days later, my dad called Grandpa Earl directly, asking for a loan to tide them over. He blamed everything on bad legal advice and not their own cruelty. When Grandpa Earl said no, my dad snapped. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Grandpa Earl calmly told him, "If you or your daughter contact me or my granddaughter again, the next thing you'll get is a restraining order." My dad didn't take him seriously and called again the next day. Grandpa Earl didn't answer that time. Instead, he had his lawyer send a cease and desist letter. That finally shut them up. My sister made one last attempt through a mutual friend. She sent a message saying she wanted to make peace and fix our relationship. The friend, who knew the whole story, asked if I wanted to reply. I said no. I've learned that her version of fixing things usually means I'm supposed to apologize for stuff I never did. Since then, it's been quiet. No surprise visits, no text from strange numbers, no social media drama. They finally seem to understand their actions have real consequences. Grandpa Earl's health is holding steady. I visit him every week, and we've grown even closer through all this. I guess that's everything. Thanks for reading and for being there, everyone.